Winter, 1831. A woman is walking through frozen ground. No coat, no shoes. A child on her back. Behind her, U.S. Army soldiers. Ahead, 500 miles of land she has never seen. She did not choose this. She was ordered onto it by an act of Congress. Thousands walked with her. Thousands never reached the end. This is what happened to the Choctaw Nation. And what they did after is a story history has largely ignored. The Choctaw people did not appear in Mississippi by accident. They had been there for thousands of years. Archaeological and historical records show they developed one of the most organized civilizations in pre-colonial North America. Agricultural systems, formal trade networks, a clan-based social structure, and a council government long before European contact. When the United States was founded, the Choctaw did not resist diplomatically. They engaged. They signed formal treaties, the Treaty of Hopewell in 1786, the Treaty of Mount Dexter in 1805, legal agreements in which they surrendered territory in exchange for guaranteed protections of their remaining lands and sovereignty. Those agreements were honored.
By the late 1820s, southern states, particularly Mississippi and Georgia, were under enormous pressure from land-hungry settlers moving west. State legislatures began passing laws that directly violated federal treaties, stripping native nations of legal protections within their own territories. The federal government had a choice: honor its treaties or side with the states. Andrew Jackson made that choice very clear. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 did not come from nowhere. It was the political result of years of lobbying by southern states, land speculators, and politicians who wanted native lands cleared for cotton farming and white settlement. President Jackson signed the act in May 1830. It authorized the forced relocation of all native nations east of the Mississippi to designated territory west of it. The Choctaw were the first nation removed under the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, signed later that same year. Choctaw leaders signed under considerable pressure. U.S. military presence surrounded the negotiations. Their options had been made clear. Removal happened in three waves: 1831, 1832, and 1833. What followed is documented in U.S. government correspondence, military records, and eyewitness accounts from American and European observers. The federal government had contracted private companies to handle food, transport, and supplies. Those contractors failed systematically. Late deliveries, inadequate rations, missing equipment. The first group marched in the winter of 1831, one of the most severe winters that region had experienced in years. Historical weather records and contemporary accounts both confirm this. People walked through snow, swamp, and frozen terrain without adequate clothing or food. Alexis de Tocqueville, the French political philosopher traveling in America at the time, witnessed a Choctaw removal group crossing the Mississippi River. He recorded it in his personal notes, describing their composure under conditions of severe hardship. His account remains one of the most cited eyewitness records of this period. A cholera epidemic swept through the groups during the second wave in 1832. Historians estimate between 2,500 and 6,000 Choctaw people died during the removal, from a population of approximately 21,000. That figure comes from demographic analyses of Choctaw census records before and after removal.
The removal took more than land. In Choctaw culture, land and spiritual identity are inseparable. Specific rivers, forests, and burial grounds carry generations of meaning. You cannot pack that into a wagon. Federal policy knew this and targeted it directly. The U.S. boarding school system, formally established in 1879, removed Native children from their families, banned their languages, and punished traditional practices. Carlisle founder Richard Henry Pratt stated the goal openly in his 1892 speech: eliminate Native identity, force assimilation. That was not fringe thinking. It was official policy for decades. But Choctaw families kept speaking their language at home, quietly, carefully. Elders passed down oral histories. Ceremonies continued in private. Linguists who have studied Choctaw language survival confirm it did not survive by accident. Families made a conscious decision to protect it, even under direct pressure to abandon it. That decision would matter more than anyone realized. They arrived in present-day Oklahoma with almost nothing. Unfamiliar land, no infrastructure, no support from the government that put them there. Within a decade, they had rebuilt. By 1838, the Choctaw Nation had a new written constitution. By 1844, they had established a formal school system, Spencer Academy, New Hope Seminary, making them among the first peoples west of the Mississippi to build organized public education for both men and women. They ran their own courts, published a bilingual newspaper, wrote a legal code. Accepting American communications, standard military codes were being broken within hours. Captain E.H. Horner of the 36th Division proposed a solution: use Choctaw soldiers to transmit messages in their native language. Approximately 8 Choctaw men served in this role during the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. U.S. military records confirm Choctaw language communications were used for troop coordination in the final weeks of fighting. Field commanders reported improved operational security during that period. To be historically precise, their role was limited in scope and smaller in scale than the more extensively documented Navajo Code Talker program of World War II. But the documented fact remains. The 20th century brought economic devastation. The Dawes Act of 1887 had broken up communally held tribal lands into individual allotments. Nationally, Native nations lost roughly 90 million acres under this policy, documented by federal historical records. For the Choctaw, this meant loss of land, reduced governmental authority, and deep poverty. By mid-century, unemployment in Choctaw communities reached 60 to 75%, figures cited in Bureau of Indian Affairs reports and congressional testimony. The Indian Self-Determination Act of 1975 changed the legal landscape, giving tribes real control over their own governance and federal programs. Today, the Choctaw Nation is the third largest federally recognized tribal nation in the United States. Over 200,000 enrolled citizens. They operate healthcare facilities, manufacturing, agriculture, and technology sectors across southeastern Oklahoma. Their health system serves tens of thousands of Native patients annually. Language revitalization programs are bringing Choctaw back to younger generations, reversing decades of forced loss. And one connection worth knowing. In 1847, less than 15 years after the Trail of Tears, Choctaw communities collected $170 for Irish famine relief. For a people still rebuilding from mass death and forced removal, it was a significant act of solidarity. The Indian Removal Act was law. The Trail of Tears happened under legal authority. The boarding school policy was official government direction. None of it was hidden. Most of it was documented by the very people who carried it out. And the Choctaw Nation is still here, still governing, still teaching their language, still building. Their story is not just a Native American story. If this history was new to you, that itself is worth thinking about. Share it with someone who should know it. And if you want history told this way, accurate, complete, no shortcuts, this is where that work continues.